Now, parts of Durban are still being affected by water shortages. This says the Umngeni Water entity in eThekwini Municipality battles to fix a broken shaft pump at the Durban Heights Water Treatment facility. The pump, which conveys raw water from the Inanda Dam, failed on the 11th of November. Now, to discuss this issue, I'm joined by water expert Professor Anthony Turton from the Free State University Centre for Environmental Management Department. Professor, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Now, Umngeni itself has been in the media for the longest time. If it's not contractors being murdered, it's CEOs in hiding, contracts being challenged in court, to board members fighting to reverse their removal, and now failing pumps. And, you know, I listened to eThekwini Mayor Mxolisi Kawunda commit to resolving the issues of Umngeni, but where does one start?
Yes, I think these things are very complex and I think they're deeply embedded. We need look no further than the famous case of Umngeni, who was also involved in Umngeni Water and trying to link it up to Umngeni Water to try and effectively raid the balance sheet of Umngeni Water to do other things with Umngeni. So I think there's a level of corruption there that's quite deep, and we can see that manifesting now in all the ways that you've mentioned. But there are two important ways that or issues that I think are important, we need to discuss now. The one is the issue of the shaft pump that is broken, which in my view is just a dead standard item that requires redundancy, because any item of that nature that can break down and cause such a catastrophic failure should in fact have some form of redundancy built in. So that speaks to that element of it. And the other story, I think, is actually a good news story. The fact that through forensic auditing, they've now found quite substantial amount of corruption. And I think that in this bad situation, that is actually a good news story.
No, now I understand fully with the redundancy issue, but speaking of that report, that SIU report revealed that 300 million was paid to the late Mr. Shinga for what is termed a social facilitation contract. I must say it was the first time I heard of a social facilitation contract, and when I inquired further, it's some sort of a contract where one seeks to smooth out the relationship between a contractor and the community. Why in the world do we need such a contract where government is paying 300,000 for a contractor to somehow be able to do his job in a particular community?
Well, in a normal constitutional democracy, that is called extortion. And we need look no further. Just do a Google search of the big construction companies that are listed on the JSE in South Africa, and you'll find that all of those construction companies are in serious difficulties today simply because of what is known as the construction mafia. And the construction mafia is a group of gangsters that goes around and causes all kinds of drama to your project, and they then come and offer you the solution, and they say, if you pay us off now, we will make your problem go away. So this is extortion. It is a breakdown of the rule of law, and all of this speaks to another very, very important issue, and that is the issue of governance, and particularly the breakdown of the authority of the Department of Water and Sanitation in its role as regulator. We've been working through various entities, OUTA being one of them, engaging with Parliament on the need to create an independent water regulator, because without an independent water regulator, we are not going to be able to get these problems sorted out. It is quite clear that the Department of Water and Sanitation is unable to execute its role as regulator in the way that we would require of it.
Now, this form of extortion, from what I'm hearing from you and what we've seen, is clearly now being legitimized by government if they're going to term it as social facilitation contract, because they were willing to pay this 300 million, meaning they're allowing for the continuation of these construction mafias. Because
yes,
there must be
exactly.
somebody that then takes money to them to sort of ease the pressure if they're threatening to stop your construction project.
Absolutely. We cause you the problem, and then only we can make the problem go away. And you see that deeply embedded within the Department of Water and Sanitation now, where the bigger the problem that they confront, the bigger the opportunity that's created now for all kinds of facilitated deals, whether it's supply of tankers, whether it's a supply of JoJo tanks, whether it's a supply of whatever it is, a PPE or whatever. The bigger the crisis, the bigger the opportunity now for self-enrichment. And I think we're starting to see the public getting really sick and tired of this now. And the good news is that the Priority Crimes Unit of the SIU is now starting to take this matter very seriously. And I think in the very near future, you're going to start seeing a lot more arrests along these lines.
But now with the reinstatement of this new board, we know that Lindiwe Sisulu had a new board because she questioned how Gugile Nkwinti had actually gone on to establish the first one. It's back now. And my big question is, whom between the two boards actually okayed the situation of a facilitation contract? And when I trace back, it looks like it's the board that we now have again.
Well, once again, it's a state-owned enterprise. All of the water boards, whether it's Umngeni Water or Mshatuz or Berg or whatever, the Rand Water Board, they all state-owned entities. They only have one shareholder, and that is government. And government's responsible for it. And of course, these things have been cash cows now for so long. This has been the milk cow for corruption, to a very, very deep extent. Now, how are we going to deal with this going forward, given the fact that the fiscal cliff is coming onto us very, very soon? The government is not going to be able to pay the kind of money that is being thrown around. Now, it's not a bottomless pit. We pretty much run towards the end of the financial resources that we have available to the fiscus. So we are actually coming up against a very, very dire situation now. And we're seeing it happen now, getting back to the start of this conversation. Here you have a shaft pump that is a mission-critical pump, 200 or so meters underground with a shaft. It's if that thing breaks down, then there's a whole lot of knock-on effects. There should be planning around the redundancy of that, even if not just to have a spare pump, readily available. Then that planning should have been done, and that procurement should have been done. And it's a question of, do you prioritize the procurement of a mission-critical pump like that, which is a high-value, a long lead-time item, or do you prioritize the facilitation on some trumped-up sort of issue that local communities are discontented, and therefore you have to facilitate, some other arrangement between them and a contractor doing legitimate work on behalf of the people of South Africa? I mean, this is nothing more than extortion.
And it's really unfortunate because when we speak to a water expert, we want to deal with the technical aspects of how we get water to citizens. But here we are. We're preoccupied between you and I on unpacking the SIU's report because corruption has just taken a hold on South Africa that really it becomes the focal point as opposed to the main issue of a failing pump and the failure to have some sort of redundancy there. But then if we had to talk about the situation of the construction mafia, it really speaks to a legitimate issue of economic inclusion in these communities, where I'm actually going to be speaking to the Black Business Forum a bit later. I wish you guys were actually on at the same time, but we'll speak to them a bit later. It speaks to the issue of inclusion here, where you have black communities that saying we're having these well-resourced companies that are coming to improve our community here, and we're saying, give us something, whether it's a subcontract, because at this point we do not have the machinery to actually go and bid for some of these contracts. So give us a foot in the door. So you see, it becomes embedded in all of these things where there are legitimate issues of economic inclusion, of the historically disadvantaged. So what do you make of that whole argument where when Black Business Forum says, no, we're not a mafia, we're actually just fighting for a piece of the pie?
Well, I think the vision that we need is an inclusive vision of growth, inclusive growth. If we don't have at least 5% economic growth per annum for the next 2 decades, we are not going to be able to employ the people, the born frees. It's as simple as that. So the question is, how do we get that vision of inclusive growth? Do we force it through with this kind of I would call it extra legal activity, or do we create some other incentive structure? This is the thing that's been eluding us. We need to have that inclusive growth. I work with the Public-Private Growth Initiative through the SA Business Water Chamber, and we are working very, very deeply with various actors in government to try and create this 5% economic growth. But you can't create 5% economic growth in a water, energy, and capital-constrained economy. Those are our three fundamental constraints. We ran out of water in 2002. We ran out of capital in 2012, and now we've run out of energy. Goodness knows when. But we these are three fundamental constraints. So how are we going to make the pie bigger in order to give everyone a bite of that pie? And at the moment, the pie is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and everyone is squabbling now about their size of that pie. This is simply not sustainable. So we have to get to the situation where we need inclusive growth, and we need to have a water, energy, and investment capital foundation for any economic growth and development in future.
And I must correct there, it's the Black Business Federation, not the Black Business Forum. Don't want to be sued on that one. Formerly known as the Federation for Radical Economic Transformation in KZN. We'll be speaking to them a bit later on. Professor, thank you very much for your time. That's Professor Anthony Turton from the Free State University's Center for Environmental Management Department, speaking to us about the water shortages affecting parts of eThekwini due to a failed shaft pump at the Durban Heights Water Treatment Facility. But clearly, we're talking more corruption, less on the technical aspects that bring water to you and I.